Okay, so here's something kind of wild. You know how sometimes Hollywood and, well, the Vatican seem like completely different universes?
Worlds apart, yeah.
Exactly. But last year, this movie came out, Conclave, and honestly, it's almost spooky how much its fictional papal election felt like the real one back in 2013, the one that gave us Pope Francis.
It is pretty uncanny, isn't it? That whole process, electing a pope, it's this incredibly closed off, hugely important event for what, over a billion Catholics?
Right. And it's not like some standard corporate meeting. Think more like, I don't know, high-stakes reality TV meets ancient ritual, all secret
Uh-huh.
ballots and smoke signals.
Absolutely. It makes you think about how fiction sometimes taps into something real, maybe patterns in how leaders are chosen, even in such unique settings.
And the timing for us talking about this,
Hmm.
well, it feels really poignant with the news just yesterday about Pope Francis passing away on April 29th.
Hmm. It makes this whole discussion feel very immediate. The world's attention is turning back to the Vatican, to the prospect of another real conclave.
So that's what we're diving into today, this strange overlap. How did this movie, Conclave, seem to almost predict parts of the 2013 election? And, maybe more importantly, what clues could that give us now?
Yeah, what insights might it offer? It's a fascinating angle. Get ready for some definite aha moments, I think.
Okay, so before we even get to the movie or 2013, you really have to picture Vatican City itself.
Oh, definitely. It's the sovereign nation, but it's incredibly small. You could probably fit the whole thing inside a big Walmart parking lot. Seriously.
No way, that small.
Yep. But its influence, absolutely global. It's this strange mix. You've got priests, nuns, the Swiss Guard in those amazing uniforms, all packed into this tiny space that somehow sways world events.
So the Pope isn't just like the spiritual leader. He's the CEO, chief diplomat,
Yeah.
juggling a lot.
A huge amount, which is why the transition when a pope dies or resigns and Benedict the 66 resignation in 2013 was a huge deal, the first in 600 years.
Right, that almost never happens.
Exactly. When that happens, the conclave kicks in, this ancient, highly ritualized process.
Talk us through that a bit, the conclave itself.
Sure. So you have about 120 cardinals, the top leaders, basically, but they have to be under 80 years old to vote. And they get locked inside the Sistine Chapel, literally. The name conclave means with a key.
Locked in. No phones, no Twitter.
Nothing. Total isolation. Just them, Michelangelo's ceiling, and the task ahead. They vote usually multiple times a day.
And the smoke signals. That's the famous part.
That's the communication to the outside world. If a vote doesn't produce a winner, needs a two-thirds majority, they burn the ballots with special chemicals to make black smoke. Fumata nera.
Deadlock. Keep trying. Exactly. But when they finally elect someone, they use different chemicals. White smoke, fumata bianca, and then that famous announcement from the balcony, Habemus Papam.
We have a pope. Sounds so dramatic, so deliberate in its secrecy.
It is. But beneath all the ritual, you have to remember these are human beings. Cardinals, yes, but with their own backgrounds, maybe alliances, maybe even, old arguments or different ideas about where the church should go. Like Game of Thrones, but with much better vestments.
Ah, maybe a little less bloodshed, hopefully.
Hmm.
But yeah, there's strategy, there's influence, they believe the Holy Spirit guides the choice, but there are definitely human dynamics at play. It's faith and, well, complex group decision-making.
Okay, so let's go back to 2013. Benedict resigns. Big shock. What was the mood like in the church then?
It was a difficult time, frankly. There were major scandals swirling the Vatican bank issues, the ongoing clergy abuse crisis and how it was handled, a general feeling the Vatican bureaucracy, the curia, was slow, maybe resistant to change.
So a sense that things needed a shakeup.
Definitely. A desire for reform, for a fresh start, was palpable among many.
And who are the main contenders expected to be? The frontrunners.
Well, many have certainly focused on a couple of prominent Italian cardinals, like Angelo Scola of Milan. He was seen as representing a certain continuity, perhaps.
Okay. Anyone else?
And Cardinal Odilo Scherer from Brazil. He was well connected within the Vatican administration. Those are the names you heard most often, seen as the established choices, perhaps.
But then came the surprise.
Then came Cardinal Jorge Mario Bergoglio from Argentina, a Jesuit, which itself was unusual for a potential pope. And he was known for this incredibly simple life in Buenos Aires.
The slum cardinal, right? Took the bus, lived in a small apartment.
Exactly. Focused on the poor, the marginalized. He really wasn't on most people's short lists for the papacy itself. Maybe a respected voice, but not the likely winner. Low expectations for him personally becoming pope.
So what changed? What was the turning point?
It seems a key moment was a speech he gave just before the conclave started to the other cardinals.
Oh, what did he say?
He apparently warned against the church becoming too inward-looking, too self-referential was the term used, sick almost. He urged them to look outwards, to the peripheries, to the poor, to evangelize.
Wow, that must have hit hard.
Reports say it really resonated, like you said, a spiritual mic drop. It framed the choice differently, not just about managing the institution, but about its core mission.
And the result?
The result was Pope Francis, the first Jesuit pope, the first from the Americas, the first named Francis, after St. Francis of Assisi, the saint of poverty and peace. A huge shift.
In his first act, asking the crowd to pray for him before he blessed them. That felt different immediately.
It absolutely did. Signaled humility, a different style of leadership right from the start. A genuine surprise.
Okay, now let's pivot to the movie, Conclave.
Yeah.
Released last year, 2024. Directed by Roland Joffé, Ralph Fiennes is in it.
Right, and it's positioned as this intense psychological thriller, all set during a fictional papal election.
So the plot in the movie, Pope dies, cardinals gather. There are initial favorites, right? A conservative Italian, a more progressive cardinal.
Some familiar.
Very familiar setup. But then this other figure starts to emerge. Archbishop Vincent Benitez, he's Filipino, a Jesuit, comes from working with refugees in Kabul. Not one of the initial power players.
Okay, wait. Jesuit. Working with the marginalized emerges as a compromise candidate. The parallels with Bergoglio are starting to jump out. They really are quite striking. Both Jesuits, both emphasizing humility and service to the poor, both kind of rising from the deadlock between established factions, and both give these key speeches focusing on the church's mission.
Is there anything specific, like quotes or ideas?
Well, there's a line from Benitez in the film. The church is not tradition. The church is what we do next. It's about looking forward, action.
And how does that compare to Francis?
It really echoes that 2013 pre-conclave speech from Bergoglio about the dangers of a self-referential, sick church that isn't looking outwards, isn't doing the work of evangelization. The phrasing is different, obviously, but the core idea, very, very similar. It's about purpose over preservation.
It's like the filmmakers knew somehow. Spooky.
And the atmosphere in the movie, too. The fictional conclave happens against this backdrop of scandals, corruption, abuse cover-ups, even a bombing in the film's plot.
Which reflects the real crises the church was facing in 2013.
Exactly. The Vatican bank issues, the abuse scandal. The film captures that sense of crisis, that pressure for change, even through its fictional plot points.
So let's separate fact and fiction a bit. The movie gets the basic process right. Locked chapel, smoke signals, ballot burning, the 120 cardinal limit under 80.
Yes, all those procedural elements seem factually grounded. They depict the rituals accurately.
And the real 2013 events, Benedict's resignation, Bergoglio's surprise election, the backdrop of scandals, that's all historical fact.
Correct. That's a real history the film seems to echo.
But the movie is fiction. A Filipino cardinal from Kabul in 2013 wasn't a real thing, and there are specific plot twists for dramatic effect.
Of course. It's a thriller. It needs its own narrative. But what it seems to capture incredibly well, according to people who know, is the feel of a conclave. The tensions, the politicking, the alliances forming and shifting. The author of the book it's based on, Robert Harris, apparently did a lot of research, talked to Vatican insiders.
Which brings us to the how. How does a dark horse candidate actually win? It can't just be a great speech, right? There's got to be some strategy. The art of the holy deal, maybe?
Oh, absolutely. There's definitely strategy involved. We know Bergoglio had key supporters, cardinals sometimes called the Gang of Eight or the St. Gallen Group, depending on who you read. People like Cardinal Mardiaga, Cardinal Marx.
And what were they doing?
They were positioning him as a reformer, someone different from Benedict VI's more academic style, highlighting his simplicity, the whole preferring a Fiat 500 to the papal limo image, whether literal or symbolic, played into that, building momentum for him as a viable alternative.
And does the movie show similar things? Coalition building?
Yes. Conclave depicts that kind of maneuvering. You see cardinals having quiet conversations, trying to gauge support, building bridges. Benitez wins because he becomes the candidate the different factions can eventually agree on, the unifying figure. It's like, well, like Survivor, but with votes for Pope instead of immunity idols.
Okay, maybe. But less backstabbing, one hopes.
One hopes. But the film does show those small, accurate details, too, the way they fold the ballots, the oath of secrecy everyone takes, even mentioning the chemicals for the smoke. It adds to the realism.
There's this idea of quiet radicalism for both Francis and Benitez. What does that mean?
It means challenging the status quo, but not always through loud pronouncements. For Francis, it was things like rejecting the fancy papal palace, wearing simple shoes, telling bishops to smell like the sheep, be close to their people, symbolic acts with deep meaning.
And for Benitez in the film.
Similar vibe. He talks about the people who can't share a meal, criticizing the church's focus on power and wealth over basic human needs. It's a gentle critique, but pointed.
There's also that interesting story about Bergoglio in the 2005 Conclave, the one that elected Benedict.
Right. The story goes that he was getting significant votes then, perhaps enough to block Ratzinger initially, but he asked his supporters to shift their votes to Ratzinger. Stepped aside, essentially.
How does that play into 2013?
Well, if true, it built this image of someone not seeking power for himself. It adds credibility. By 2013, he seemed like someone who wasn't ambitious for the role, which, paradoxically, might have made him a more attractive candidate to some.
And Benitez in the movie, does he seem reluctant?
He doesn't campaign for it. He focuses on service, on the issues he cares about. He doesn't seem to want the papacy, which, again, makes him seem like a potentially purer choice in the film's narrative. It's a recurring theme, humility as a path to power in this specific context.
So, fast forward to today, 2025. Pope Francis has passed away.
Mm.
The cardinals will gather again soon. What's the context now?
The world is, well, it's facing enormous challenges, isn't it? Wars, the climate crisis is accelerating, deep economic inequality, ongoing culture wars.
There's a lot on the next pope's plate.
A tremendous amount. And the church, despite declining influence in some areas, is still a major global player. The next pope's voice will carry weight. They could be a force for unity or potentially deepen divisions, depending on the direction they take.
What's Pope Francis's legacy look like, thinking about the next choice?
It's complex. He had so many firsts washing prisoners' feet on Holy Thursday, that powerful climate encyclical Laudato Si, apologizing for abuse, his consistent focus on migrants and the poor. He definitely pushed the church in a certain direction.
But he faced pushback too, right?
Oh, absolutely. From conservative wings who felt he was diluting doctrine or causing confusion, but also sometimes from progressives who felt he didn't go far enough on certain issues like women's roles or LGBTQ plus inclusion. He was a polarizing figure in many ways.
So the movie Conclave ended hopefully with its fictional Pope Innocent as a symbol of renewal. Could the real Conclave achieve something similar?
That's the big question, isn't it? Will the cardinals lean towards continuity with Francis's vision? Will they seek a more traditional path? Or will we see another complete surprise, someone totally unexpected who emerges to lead in these turbulent times?
Taking an even wider view, what does all this tell us about institutions, maybe faith, in a world that feels so fractured?
That's a great point. We live in a time of declining trust in many institutions. Pope Francis made a real effort to build bridges, talking with other faiths, with atheists, calling for a culture of encounter, trying to find common ground.
Do you think the next pope will continue that?
It's a critical choice they'll face. Continue reaching out, trying to heal divides, or turn inward. Focus on strengthening the church's internal identity. The potential impact is huge.
It really feels like that line from the movie you mentioned, "The church is what we do next," has a lot of weight right now.
It really does. It suggests that change doesn't just happen. It comes from individuals making conscious choices, daring to imagine something better. This upcoming conclave feels like one of those moments, a choice about leadership focused on healing, on service, on navigating these incredibly complex times.
So wrapping this up, these parallels between the movie Conclave and the reality of 2013 are more than just coincidence, maybe. They really do offer some valuable insights into the dynamics inside those locked doors.
I think so. Even as a fictional thriller, it taps into the human drama, the strategic thinking, and the profound stakes involved in choosing a leader for such a vast and influential global community. It makes you think about the process itself.
And it leaves us, and you listening, with a pretty big question as we watch events unfold in Rome, doesn't it?
Definitely. What kind of leader does the world need now? And will this ancient secret process somehow produce that person? It's something to really ponder: leadership, humility, faith, and their role in trying to fix a very broken world.